Everyone, and today we'll start with a very important topic from both the aspect, from the university exam point of view also and from the NEET MDL's entrance exam also. And in entrance they always gonna pick one or two questions from this topic. So the topic is temporomandibular joint and we'll study this topic in detail. So as its name derived from the joint that connect mandible, which is this lower jaw, this is lower jaw, to the temporal bone of the skull. This is a temporal portion of the skull. And how these two components connect to each other through articular surfaces. And we'll next that what are the articular surfaces which provides or connect these two bony components. And after articulating with each other, they work as single unit bilaterally. Why bilaterally? Because this same unit is present on the both the side of the cheek or face. So before knowing the articular surfaces, we'll study this first, the structure of TMJ. So this is the temporal portion of the skull, and this temporal portion comprised of articular tubercle. So this is an articular tubercle. This is a mandibular fossa, and this structure is a non-articulating tympanic plate. And this one is an head of the mandible. And this is a mandible. This structure in blue is known as an intra-articular disc. Okay, and these two bony components are covered by a fibrocartilage tissue. And this muscle here, it is a lateral pterygoid. Now we'll study about the articular surfaces. Articular surfaces are the surface which provide connection between these two bony components. One is temporal, another one is mandible, and we'll see that what mandibular structures give its articulation to the another structures. So upper articular surface is comprised of three components, which is this articular tubercle, interior part of mandibular fossa, and the next is posterior non-articular surface by tympanic plate, and the lower articular surface of the head of mandible. Okay, and these articular surfaces are covered by a fibrocartilage tissue. So the next one is synonyms of temporomandibular joint, or what other we can say to temporomandibular joint. So the next is other's name. So it is also known as a ginglymoarthroidal joint or synovial joint. So as we know, ginglymus, which itself known as a hinge joint, and arthroidal means gliding or translatory. So that and the ginglymoarthroidal joint means which show both the motion. The hinge motion means rotation motion or the gliding motion, and it is present between the temporal bone and the mandibular bone, this temporal portion and this mandible portion. And we'll see that which component gives sliding motion and which gives a hinge or rotation motion. So the structure that present between this glenoid fossa and intra-articular disc, it's provide a gliding motion or translatory motion, whereas the portion between intra-articular disc and the head of mandible, it mainly provide a hinge motion or rotation motion. It provide a hinge motion or a rotation motion. Gliding or translatory motion, which provide this compartment, show more movement where as comparison to the hinge or a rotation motion. So next one is synovial joint, the joint between two bone filled with the fluid. So both the compartments are filled with the fluid. And the next topic is really important, which is known as an articular disc. So the articular disc is an oval predominant fibrous plate. So as you can see, this is a fibrous plate. And the disc is concavo-convex surface superior and concave inferior surface. So this is an superior surface and this is an inferior surface. So what it's saying, that superior surface is concave convexo surface. First it's like concave, then it's a convex surface. As you know that concavity is like this and convex is like this. So it's saying the disc is a concave and convex surface on a superior portion, and this whole concave on the inferior surface. So the disc divides the joint into two compartments. The disc divides the joint into two compartments. One, this is an upper compartment, this is in a lower compartment. The upper compartment is present mainly between this glenoid fossa and this intra-articular disc, and the lower compartment is present between this intra-articular disc and this head of the mandible. So the upper portion mainly provide glenoid motion or translatory motion, and the lower motion, this lower compartment provides hinge or rotation motion. As this topic is really important, not only from this aspect, also from the prostho aspect also. So learn thoroughly that this upper compartment provides a glenoid motion and this lower portion provides a hinge or rotation motion. Like hinge or rotation, it's like that it mainly rotate in its same position, whereas gliding or translatory give more movement or provide more motion. So what are the components of the disc? The disc is composed of an interior extension, as you can see over here. It's an interior extension, it's interior extension, interior band, intermediate zone. This is a posterior band, this is a biliminary region which divides, give rise to two regions. So this intermediate zone is the thinnest portion and it's also an avascular portion, and the posterior band is the thicker band from all this band. So the disc is composed of interior extension, interior thick band, intermediate zone, the posterior thick band and biliminary region. What are the functions which is provided by a disc? One is prevents disc friction, and this is the most important. It provides a disc friction, as this component helps not to articulate the two bony components. So, and it is present between these two components. It prevents disc friction. If two bony components articulate with each other, so then friction will happen. So because of presence of this fibrous tissue, it prevents disc friction. And next one, it's act as a cushion and help in shock absorption. And then next is proprioceptive fibers present in disc help to regulate movements of the joint, and the disc help in distribution of weight across TMJ by increasing the area of contact. So the third point is like the proprioceptive fibers are present in disc help to regulate movement of the joint. That some fibers are present in this area which detect the movement of the joint, like depression, elevation, side to side movements, like depression, opening of mouth or closing of mouth. So yes, now we'll study the ligaments of the temporomandibular joint. So there are four ligaments that present in TMJ. That one is fibrous capsule, next one is lateral temporomandibular ligament, next is phenomandibular ligament, and next is stylomandibular ligament. We'll study about the fibrous capsule and we'll see where it's located mainly. So fibrous capsule, as its name only telling us that it is composed of, it is a fibrous tissue, and it articulates with articular tubercle. Above it's articulate with articular tubercle and circumference of the mandibular fossa, and behind the squamotympanic fissure. This is a squamotympanic fissure, behind it's located here. Below here it's neck of mandible, like there is in one diagram you can see over here. Then behind it's mainly locates at the neck of the mandible. So yes, and the capsule is loose above intra-articular disc and the disc is present behind it, so it is loose above the intra-articular disc and tied below it. So this capsule is covering that intra-articular disc and above that disc it's a loose one, and behind and below that disc it's tight in structure. And the next one is lateral temporomandibular ligament. So we'll see its attachment. It's given that it's above, it's attached to the articular tubercle, below to the posterolateral aspect of neck of mandible. If we see over here, that below it's attached to the posterolateral neck of the mandible. Aspect neck of the mandible. Yeah. So next one is sphenomandibular ligament. Give this. So sphenomandibular ligament and the stylomandibular ligament both are the accessory ligaments. So it is attached above to the spine of sphenoid. As you can see here, behind it there is a pterygoid process. Below it there is sphenoid, that it is attached to the spine of sphenoid, inferior to the lingua of the mandible foramen. Portion of the ramus of mandible, it is attached to the lingual portion of the mandible foramen, and it's a remnant of dorsal part of Meckel's cartilage. So the next one is stylomandibular ligament. So above it is attached to the lateral surfaces of styloid process, below to the angle and the adjacent part of posterior border of ramus of mandible. Here it's attached, and this ligament separates the parotid gland and the submandible salivary gland. This is very important point, that this ligament, stylomandibular ligament, this ligament separates the parotid and the submandibular salivary gland. So in this diagram all the ligaments are present. This is a stylomandibular ligament, this is a sphenomandibular ligament, this is a fibrous capsule, and this is a lateral mandibular ligament. So the next we'll study about the movement which mainly produced by the TMG. And this is the important thing. Movement produced by the TMG. These are the action and these are the muscle involved in producing that movements, like depression. Depression means opening of the mouth. And which muscles involved? There is a lateral pterygoid, digastric, genohyoid and mylohyoid. If you can see over here, this is the lateral pterygoid muscles. So these arrow can show that this muscles involved in depression and opening of the mandible. So another one is elevation or closed mouth, and these muscles are also known as an anti-gravity. So because anti-gravity, because it's applying force in closing the mandible. So which muscles involved? One is masseter, temporalis and medial pterygoid. If you can see over here, then temporalis, it's involving in closing the mouth, and one is medial pterygoid, closing the mouth, and one is masseter. Next is protrusion. These protrusion means like it's able to bring the mandible forward, and which muscles helps in doing that? Lateral pterygoid and medial pterygoid. If you see over here, this is a lateral pterygoid and this is a lateral pterygoid and this is a medial pterygoid. Arrow showing that it helps in protrusion of mandible. These two, lateral pterygoid and medial pterygoid. And another one is retraction, which helps bring the mandible backward. So which muscle? Temporalis. If you can see this sign, temporalis, bring the mandible backward, and one is masseter. So the next is side to side movements. When we bring the mandible to the left side, so which muscles mainly involved? Right lateral pterygoid, right medial pterygoid, left temporalis and left masseter. So when we bring the mandible to the left side, the right pterygoid muscles are involved, whereas when they bring the mandible to the right side, the left pterygoid muscles are involved. So it is important to remember this. Then when we bring the mandible to the left side, which muscles are involved? Right lateral pterygoid, right medial pterygoid, left temporalis and left masseter. And when we bring the mandible to the right side, then lateral pterygoid, left medial pterygoid, right temporalis and right masseter muscles are mainly involved. So I hope this topic is get clear to you, and so thank you so much.